You must have crammed in a lot of living since our last picture. I got a 60-year-old saddle that looks better than you do.
Dean Martin finally revealed the truth about John Wayne, and it wasn't flattering. On Christmas Day in 1995, Dean Martin lay in his Beverly Hills home, his once famous voice reduced to a fragile whisper. The man who had charmed millions and turned heartbreak into effortless cool was nearing the end of his life. But what he told his daughter, Dina, that morning would challenge everything people believed about one of Hollywood's most admired friendships. For decades, America saw Dean Martin and John Wayne as symbols of loyalty and brotherhood.
Before that, he'd made a lot of musical junk, you know, kissing girls, guys leaping all over, singing and dancing, fancy costumes, you know, that red silk handkerchief.
The smooth singer and the rugged cowboy appeared inseparable, embodying friendship and masculine strength during Hollywood's golden age. Their bond looked unshakable. But behind the glamorous parties, film sets, poker games, and late-night laughter, Dean carried a secret that haunted him for years. It was a betrayal so painful that he stayed silent about it until his final hours. What Dean revealed wasn't only about John Wayne. It exposed the hidden cost of fame, misplaced loyalty, and the bitterness that grows when someone you once loved becomes the person you resent most. But before the anger came, there was genuine friendship. Their story began in 1958 on the set of Rio Bravo. Director Howard Hawks quickly noticed something unusual. Despite coming from different worlds, Dean and John connected almost instantly. Dean was the son of an Italian immigrant barber from Steubenville, Ohio. He had boxed, dealt cards, and sung his way out of poverty. John Wayne, born Marion Morrison in Iowa, had carefully built the larger-than-life image that made him America's most famous cowboy. By all logic, they shouldn't have been close. Dean was effortless and relaxed. John was disciplined and deliberate, shaping every movement and line through hard work. Yet somehow they fit. Their friendship deepened through long poker nights after filming.
Maybe I read the wrong dictionary, but I thought that a liberal was a man who would listen to everybody's point of view and then make up his mind.
Inside John's trailer, with cards spread across the table and bourbon nearby, they talked for hours. John gave Dean affectionate nicknames, while Dean called him Duke, with a warmth few people shared. Soon their families became part of the friendship. Sundays were spent together at John's Newport Beach home, where their children played and their wives grew close. To Hollywood, it looked like the perfect friendship, strong, loyal, and built to last forever. Hollywood couldn't get enough of Dean Martin and John Wayne. The press celebrated their friendship as something rare, two of the world's biggest stars enjoying each other's company without jealousy or rivalry. To the public, they were proof that success and loyalty could exist side by side. Their friendship settled into routine. Weekly dinners at Chasen's became tradition. Dean usually arrived first, ordering bourbon and lighting a cigarette while he waited. John arrived exactly on time. Punctuality was part of who he was. Over drinks, they spent hours talking. Nothing was off limits. They discussed Hollywood, politics, family, marriage, and the quiet fear of growing older in an industry obsessed with youth. Dean, who rarely trusted people with his real feelings, surprised himself by opening up to John in ways he never had with Frank Sinatra or even the Rat Pack. For a man surrounded by fame, yet often isolated by it, the friendship felt different. Dean's carefree image had always been a shield. The charming drinker who seemed untouched by life was partly an act, designed to keep people at a distance. But with John, or so Dean believed, he finally lowered that wall. Their bond only strengthened when they reunited on the Sons of Katie Elder in 1965.
To me, that's just a normal thing to have that kind of faith. The fact that he's let me stick around a little longer, or she let me stick around a little longer.
By then, they shared an easy rhythm. Dean often played loose with his lines to keep scenes spontaneous, and John adapted effortlessly. Their chemistry felt natural, almost effortless, and audiences loved it. America of the 1960s craved heroes, men who looked confident while the world grew more uncertain. Together, Dean and John represented that fantasy, strong, loyal, uncomplicated. But the dream wasn't as flawless as it appeared. People close to both men later admitted that small cracks had begun forming beneath the surface. They weren't dramatic at first, just moments easy to dismiss. John would correct Dean in front of others, then laugh it off as humor. He often needed the final word and naturally commanded attention wherever he went. Dean usually brushed it aside with his trademark smile. Still, friends noticed. People like Sammy Davis Jr. and Joey Bishop caught subtle changes in Dean's reactions. A brief tightening of his jaw, a flash in his eyes before the relaxed grin returned. Dean rarely confronted conflict, but something about John's behavior quietly bothered him. And those early fractures traced back to one moment. In 1964, John Wayne said something to Dean's son that would never be forgotten. Dean Paul Martin, Dino, was only 15. By every account, he was polite, respectful, and still trying to understand himself while growing up under the shadow of enormous fame. Unlike Hollywood, his greatest passion was aviation. He loved airplanes. At Santa Monica Airport, Dino spent hours watching aircraft rise into the sky, dreaming of becoming a pilot. It was a simple dream, untouched by celebrity, ego, or the complicated world surrounding his father.
He's the American James Bond.
I don't know, we got the same thing. Of course, his Eastern, mine's Western.
It sure is. I look like you're on a train.
One Sunday at John Wayne's Newport Beach home, everything quietly began to change. As the sun dropped over the Pacific, Dino Martin found himself alone with Duke on the deck. Nervous but excited, the 15-year-old spoke about his dream of becoming a pilot. Flying fascinated him, and he hoped for encouragement from the man his father respected so deeply. John listened before offering an answer Dino would never forget. "Flying's fine, kid," he said, "but real men fight. They don't sing and dance like your old man. Your father made a career out of being soft. You don't want to end up like that." Dino froze. He was only 15, standing beside one of the most famous men in America. Unsure how to respond, he nodded politely and walked away, carrying confusion and hurt he didn't fully understand. He didn't tell Dean. Instead, he told his mother, Jeannie. And Jeannie was furious. She had spent years around John Wayne and believed she understood him better than most. She had noticed the subtle digs, the quiet way he sometimes diminished Dean in social settings while disguising it as humor. That night, she told Dean exactly what had happened. For one of the few times in their marriage, she saw genuine anger rise in him, not the quick frustration he buried under jokes or bourbon. Something deeper. "He called me soft?" Dean asked quietly. Jeannie nodded. "He told our son his father wasn't a real man."
Couldn't be better off in any other place. There shouldn't be so much whining and bellyaching.
The room went silent. Jeannie urged him to confront John, and Dean agreed. He planned to do it the following week at Frank Sinatra's Palm Springs gathering. Unusually for Dean, he even rehearsed what he wanted to say. But when the night arrived, things changed. John Wayne was already there, standing at the bar with a scotch in hand. The moment he spotted Dean, his face brightened with that familiar smile. "Dino," John called out, crossing the room. Then he handed Dean a bouquet of white roses. "For Jeannie," he said warmly. "Heard she's been feeling under the weather." She hadn't. Maybe it was confusion, maybe something else. But the gesture caught Dean off guard. In front of everyone, John looked thoughtful, generous, impossible to challenge. And that was John Wayne's real talent. He understood performance, not just on screen, but in friendship, too. Public kindness had a way of silencing private confrontation. Dean smiled, accepted the flowers, and joked about John trying to steal his wife. Just like that, the confrontation disappeared. Dean buried the anger, ordered a bourbon, and played the role everyone expected. But according to friends who were there, something shifted that night. Sammy Davis Jr. noticed it first. Dean began drinking harder and faster. The relaxed charm that once defined his drinking carried a sharper edge now. He wasn't celebrating. He was trying to silence something. Over the next few years, Dean quietly started keeping score. Every comment John made about real men versus entertainers stayed with him. Every time John dominated conversations or positioned himself as the authority on politics, family, or life itself, Dean remembered. Joey Bishop later recalled Dean using a new nickname in private, the Expert. Whenever John's name came up, Dean would mutter, "Better ask the expert," his voice carrying a bitterness that hadn't been there before. Publicly, nothing changed. They still appeared together, still smiled for photographers, and still maintained the image Hollywood adored. Though dinners at Chasen's became less frequent, gossip columns continued celebrating the friendship between Dean Martin and John Wayne as if nothing had changed. But Dean's closest friends knew better. They noticed how his expression hardened whenever John was mentioned, how he avoided certain parties and quickly changed the subject. The friendship still existed on the surface, but underneath, resentment was growing.
I don't squawk and cry baby and say, geez, I had to go without meals when I was 16 and 17 years old.
Then came 1967, and this time the damage went far beyond hurt feelings. Dean Paul Martin, Dino, was 18 when police detained him at a Beverly Hills party involving marijuana. Today, it might barely make headlines, but in conservative 1960s Hollywood, especially for Dean Martin's son, it threatened scandal. Dean received the call at 3 in the morning. His son was in custody. The press hadn't learned about it yet, but Dean knew time was running out. In Hollywood, scandals moved fast, and reputations could suffer overnight. Panicked in a way his friends rarely saw, Dean immediately started making calls. You protected family by using connections. You controlled the story before it controlled you. After calling his lawyer, Dean made another call, John Wayne. Despite the tension, despite years of buried resentment and painful memories, Dean still believed John was someone he could rely on. He hoped his old friend would understand that this wasn't about politics or pride. It was about helping a young man who had made a mistake. The phone rang at John's Newport Beach home. John answered, fully awake despite the hour. Dean quickly explained everything. Dino, the marijuana, the police, and the media storm that could erupt by sunrise. He needed help. He needed John's influence. And more than anything, Dean needed proof that their friendship still meant something. There was a long silence on the phone before John Wayne finally answered. What he said stayed with Dean Martin for the rest of his life. "Dean, the kid needs to learn the hard way," John said. "This is what happens when fathers are too permissive. You can't protect them from everything." Dean was stunned. "John, this is my son," he replied. "This could ruin his life." But John's tone only grew colder, calm, confident, almost instructional. "Character comes from consequences, Dean. Hollywood spoils kids. Maybe this is exactly what he needs." The words hit hard enough. But according to the story, what came next hurt even more. John allegedly reached out to gossip columnist Hedda Hopper, one of Hollywood's most feared voices. Her columns shaped reputations and spread fast across the country. Soon after, an anonymous quote appeared criticizing permissive Hollywood parents and fathers who cared more about friendship than discipline. No name was used, but insiders believed they knew where it came from. The scandal exploded. Dino Martin's arrest became national news, and woven through the headlines was an ugly implication that Dean himself was partly to blame. Articles painted him as too lenient, too distracted, too unwilling to be a proper father. Publicly, the scandal faded within months. Charges were reduced and attention moved elsewhere. Privately, the damage remained. Dino felt he'd disappointed his father. Dean felt he had failed to protect his son, and both believed John Wayne had made an already painful situation worse. 2 weeks later, tensions finally boiled over. At a Hollywood gathering, Jeannie Martin confronted John directly. Witnesses later recalled her voice shaking with anger, something unusual for a woman known for staying composed. "You betrayed us," she said. "We needed help, and you made things worse. What kind of friend does that?" According to those present, John refused to apologize. Instead, he defended himself. "I told the truth," he answered. "Sometimes friends have to say hard things." The room turned tense enough that Frank Sinatra reportedly stepped between them and escorted Jeannie away before the argument escalated. Later that night, Frank visited Dean. He found him sitting alone in his den, surrounded by bourbon bottles. And for the first time, Frank could remember, Dean Martin was crying. Not when marriages collapsed, not during career troubles, never like this. "He went after my kid, Frank," Dean said quietly. "My kid, and he did it on purpose." Frank struggled to understand. "Why would Duke do that?" Dean looked up, exhausted and wounded. "Because he never saw me as an equal," he said. "To him, I was always the entertainer, the soft one, and this was his way of reminding me. He wanted to remind me of my place." That was how Dean explained it to Frank Sinatra. Frank tried to repair the friendship. He offered to bring the two men together and smooth things over, but Dean refused. For nearly 6 months, he ignored John's calls and avoided being anywhere near him. Privately, the friendship was finished, but Hollywood rarely allowed clean endings. Soon, circumstances pushed them back together. Charity events, tributes, and industry functions where avoiding each other would create more headlines than their disagreement itself. One tribute honoring director Howard Hawks required both men to appear and speak. So they performed. Dean smiled. John smiled. They shook hands for cameras and gave reporters the answers everyone expected. Columnists continued writing about their legendary friendship, and to the public, nothing appeared broken. But people close to them saw the difference. Sammy Davis Jr. later claimed that after the situation involving Dino, Dean never truly trusted John again. "The warmth was gone," Sammy said. "They could stand together, but it was all performance." And Dean Martin knew how to perform. He had spent years convincing audiences that drunkenness, indifference, and effortless charm were natural parts of his personality. Friendship became another role he could play flawlessly. No one watching would notice the distance, except Dean noticed, and John noticed too. That silent understanding created something worse than an open feud. It wasn't a friendship ending. It was a friendship decaying while both men pretended it still lived. And that bitterness lasted for decades. By the 1970s, both men were changing. Dean's career had shifted. The Rat Pack era was fading, his television success slowing, and he had begun withdrawing from Hollywood's social life while drinking more heavily. John Wayne faced his own battles. Cancer had nearly taken his life in the 1960s, and surviving it seemed to harden him further. Friends described him as more protective of his image and increasingly certain of his own beliefs. Whenever they crossed paths at public events, they remained polite. But beneath the courtesy, resentment had settled in. One moment stood out. At the 1972 Academy Awards, John Wayne took the stage to present an award while Dean sat in the audience, proud of a recent performance, despite not expecting to win. During his speech, John thanked what he called his real friends in Hollywood. The word lingered. To most viewers, it sounded harmless. But those familiar with their history noticed the emphasis. The cameras briefly found Dean. For a split second, his face turned cold before the practiced smile returned and the applause continued. Later backstage, Dean reportedly found Joey Bishop and delivered a line that revealed more than his public smile ever could. "I'm glad he knows the difference," Dean said quietly, "between real friends and whatever we are." The Polo Lounge incident of 1975 became unforgettable among those who witnessed it. Both men happened to be at the Beverly Hills Hotel that afternoon. Dean was eating lunch while John Wayne stood at the bar. Eventually, conversation pulled them together. It began with politics, Vietnam. John defended the war with his usual certainty, speaking about strength, patriotism, and American resolve. Dean, who normally avoided political arguments in public, finally lost patience. "You talk about strength," Dean said quietly, his voice carrying across the room. "But you've never actually fought in a war, Duke. None of us have. We only played soldiers in movies." The restaurant fell silent. Nearby conversations stopped. John's expression hardened. "I served my country in my own way," he replied. "By making propaganda films?" Dean asked. "By lecturing people about honor while staying comfortable in Hollywood?" John fired back immediately. "At least I stand for something. At least I don't stumble around drunk pretending not to care." Dean answered with a smile, the kind that made people nervous. "At least I don't preach while being a fraud." The tension exploded. They stood only inches apart. John's fists tightened while Dean swayed slightly. Whether from bourbon or anger, nobody could tell. Staff began moving toward them before an unlikely peacemaker stepped in. Jack Nicholson. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "let's not do this here." The moment ended almost as suddenly as it began. John left through one exit, Dean through another. But everyone present understood what they'd just seen. For a brief moment, the myth of their perfect friendship had cracked. Then came another wound. By 1978, Dean Paul Martin had built a life around flying. Now 29, he joined the Air National Guard, becoming the skilled pilot he'd dreamed of being since childhood. The news made headlines, and John Wayne offered a quote to reporters. "Finally, a real Martin is emerging. Good to see the boy found his backbone." The message cut deep. To Dean, it sounded less like praise for Dino and more like another attack. Another suggestion that his son had become a man only by stepping away from his father. Dean read the quote over breakfast. Jeannie watched his expression darken. "He even tries to own my children," Dean said quietly. "He can't let Dino have this moment. It always becomes about me." Jeannie urged him to speak publicly and tell people the truth about John, but Dean shook his head. "What's the point? America loves John Wayne. They'd never believe me. And honestly, I'm tired." That exhaustion became the real tragedy of the later years. Dean was tired of pretending, tired of swallowing pride and maintaining appearances. The drinking that once felt like performance now became something else, a way to dull disappointment and emotional fatigue. By the late 1970s, Dean and John barely spoke. If they met, they exchanged polite greetings and moved on. The friendship survived only in headlines. Then, in May 1979, Dean received a phone call. John Wayne was dying. Cancer had returned, and this time it was winning. More surprising still, John wanted to see him. Dean resisted. He told Frank Sinatra he couldn't do it, told Sammy Davis Jr. he wouldn't, but his friends persuaded him. They warned him that refusing might become a regret he carried forever. So Dean went. At UCLA Medical Center, he walked into John Wayne's private room. The hospital suite overflowed with flowers, telegrams, and messages from presidents, movie stars, and fans across the world. But when Dean entered, John asked everyone else to leave. For the first time in years, they were alone. Two aging legends facing mortality. Cancer had weakened John badly, but his eyes remained sharp. "Thanks for coming," John said. Dean sat beside the bed without answering. John continued carefully. "I know we've had disagreements over the years. Things were said, feelings got hurt. But that's what happens in real friendships, right? You fight, you move on." Dean stared at him. Disagreements. That was the word John chose. Then came something that sounded almost like an apology. "I'm sorry," John said, "for whatever upset you, for any misunderstandings." But to Dean, something felt wrong, because misunderstandings were accidents. Misunderstandings. Dean sat quietly in the hospital room, the word echoing in his mind. Part of him wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to walk out. Instead, he waited. Then John made his real request. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice shifting into the familiar tone Dean knew well, the tone of a man asking for a favor. "When I'm gone," John continued, "and it won't be long, I need you to speak at my funeral." Dean felt something heavy settle in his chest. "The world needs to see us together one last time," John said. "Needs to know the friendship was real, that despite everything, we were brothers." Dean understood exactly what was happening. Even facing death, John Wayne was still protecting the story he wanted history to remember. And once again, Dean was being asked to play his role. "Give them the Dean Martin they expect," John said. "The charming one, the man who loved his friend Duke." Then came the line Dean would never forget. "Make me look good." There it was, the final performance. Not for healing, not for friendship, for legacy. Dean could have refused. He could have told John exactly how he felt and left the hospital without looking back. But exhaustion, guilt, or years of Hollywood conditioning held him in place. So he nodded. "I'll do it." John smiled. "I knew I could count on you." Dean left the hospital and headed straight to a bar. Hours later, Frank Sinatra found him drinking alone. "How was it?" Frank asked. Dean stared into his glass. "He apologized for misunderstandings," he said, bitterness heavy in his voice. 30 years of betrayal, and that's what he called it. Frank already knew the answer before asking the next question. "And he asked you to speak at the funeral?" Dean nodded. "I said yes." Frank remained silent. "I'm going to stand up there," Dean continued, "and tell everyone what a great friend he was. What a great man. I'm going to lie for him one last time." John Wayne died on June 11th, 1979. His funeral became a major Hollywood event. Politicians, movie stars, and industry legends filled the room. And Dean Martin delivered the eulogy. He spoke about loyalty, strength, and friendship. He shared stories about poker games, dinners at Chasen's, and years of brotherhood. To those listening, it sounded heartfelt and sincere. John Wayne emerged from Dean's words as the perfect friend and trusted companion. People were moved to tears. But according to those closest to Dean, it may have been the greatest performance of his life, because behind every smile and warm memory stood a man carrying decades of disappointment. After the funeral ended, Sammy Davis Jr. found Dean sitting alone inside his car. His hands were shaking. "I just buried a stranger." After John Wayne's funeral, Dean sat alone in his car as Sammy Davis Jr. approached. "I stood up there and praised a man I hated," Dean said quietly. "And I did it so well that everyone believed me." Sammy looked at him. "Then why do it?" Dean stared ahead, exhausted. "Because that's what we do in Hollywood," he answered. "We perform, even when it hurts us." But the full truth stayed buried for another 16 years. Christmas Day, 1995. Dean Martin was 78, dying from emphysema and kidney failure. His daughter Dana sat beside him as morphine blurred and sharpened his thoughts in uneven waves. And during one of those moments of clarity, Dean returned to the man who had haunted so much of his life. John Wayne. "Your brother," Dean whispered, "died trying to prove he was man enough for John Wayne." Dina held his hand and listened. Dean Paul Martin had died in a plane crash in 1987 while serving as an Air National Guard pilot, the very path John had once praised. And according to this story, Dean carried that grief alongside something heavier, guilt. For years, he believed Dino had spent part of his life chasing approval that never truly belonged to him. And Dean realized he had done the same. "I spent 50 years trying to measure up," he said, "trying to fit John's idea of what a man should be." His voice weakened. "And we both failed, because John never thought anyone was enough." Tears ran down his face. Then came the confession Dina would never forget. "The person I truly hated," Dean said softly, "wasn't John Wayne." He paused. "It was myself, not for the friendship, but for needing approval, for swallowing pride, for delivering the funeral speech, for allowing another man's standards to shape how he judged himself." And in that moment, Dean saw the contradiction that had followed him his entire life. His public persona had always challenged rigid masculinity. Dean Martin made vulnerability look effortless. He turned imperfection into charm and refused to treat life with the seriousness expected of traditional Hollywood heroes. Yet privately, he had betrayed that philosophy. He had sought validation from the very kind of man his career quietly pushed against. "I forgive him," Dean whispered, struggling for breath. "I forgive John, but I'll never forgive myself for not walking away sooner, for not protecting Dino better, for caring what he thought of me." Those were said to be among Dean Martin's final clear words. He died later that Christmas Day, surrounded by family. And with him went decades of silence, regret, and unresolved emotion, except for this final confession later shared by Dina. But maybe this story was never only about Dean Martin and John Wayne. Maybe it's about something more familiar. What happens when we sacrifice parts of ourselves chasing approval from people whose respect we believe we need? When power, status, or admiration convince us to ignore our own instincts. Dean Martin spent years entertaining the world with charm, humor, and emotional honesty. Yet privately, he struggled with a lesson he taught millions without realizing it, that no person's approval is worth losing yourself. And perhaps that became the real tragedy. By the time Dean understood it, his son was gone. The friendship had become performance, and what remained was regret. If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more untold Hollywood stories, and we'll see you in the next video.